Thank you, President Toro. There isn't much that I can add to what you already alluded to. This event was very, very successful by all measures. We almost doubled our attendance from last year, and it was important to do so. We helped defeat Rent Registry in the city of Glendale, and it was important that Senator Portantino and Assemblywoman Friedman would know that their constituents don't want Rent Registry. And because this Rent Registry, again, it's reared its ugly head in the assembly, and we wanted their support in doing so. I think we have made some inroads with them in regards to that. The other thing that President Toro mentioned was Grayson, or Assemblymember Grayson's bill that we will support, and we think it's important because it really wants to stop the
You can't get in? I'm off.
I will. Sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
Okay. So the institutional takeover of single-family homes, and it was important that we have some provisions that allows, for example, a small investor, a mom and pop owner, to have a first right in participating in purchasing, especially foreclosed homes, right? And by all means, that virtual meeting was very, very successful. What I want to do is I want to start sharing my screen with you so I can make my presentation, and hopefully you would like it. I want to start giving you with some updates on state level as well as local level, what's going on state level, what are the bills that we are tracking, and it's important. And then talk to you about a poll that Glendale Association of Realtors, along with Pasadena, Burbank, Greater Los Angeles, and several other AORs participated. And that had to do with the electrification poll. The reason that I want to update you on this is because there were some overtures in one of the commissions in the city of Glendale. This is why, by the way, we wanted to do this poll. The overtures were on the issue of electrification, not so much for the new construction. We know that ours has already left the barn. In other words, there are about 50 or 52 municipalities that would require a gas cutoff and total electrification for brand new construction. Our intention was to find out whether or not an idea of electrifying existing homes. I'll give you an example. In the city of Glendale, we have a lot of vintage homes, a lot of older stock, that electrifying them would become very, very cost prohibitive. So we wanted to find out, what does the average California voter think about this thing? And how would they treat what is known as point of sale mandate, which was brought up in the Sustainability Commission in the city of Glendale, and we vociferously opposed it. In fact, we registered our disdain for stuff like that with the city manager, along with all of the city councilmen. After that poll results, I will share with you the housingiskey.com and what the results are in city of Glendale and where we're at, because there is a deadline. March 31st, up until March 31st, we can submit, or the tenants can submit, or housing providers can submit on behalf of your clients or your clients still applications to be able to be eligible for the rent that has been in arrears throughout the pandemic. Then we are going to be talking locally about local Glendale elections, which is coming up really in a twinkling of an eye, as Mark Twain said. And of course, on a lighter note, we are going to examine whether or not Glendale is a happy place to live in. Every year, Wallet Hub puts out the statistics, and let's find out what Glendale's ranking, if any, was amongst 188 or so municipalities and or cities that Wallet Hub records and grades in the entire nation. All right. One of the bills that we're tracking, not only locally but also on the CAR level, is AB 2597 that would require cooling units in all of the units, by the way. Cooling units. As you know, if you don't have a heating unit in a whether it's single family home and or a unit in an apartment building, that unit is considered substandard and cannot operate, and you cannot rent it. And so now, in addition to that, is the cooling unit, right? So they have to have some sort of an air conditioning for cooling purposes. The second one is AB or Assembly Bill 2650, which deals with pool safety point of sale mandate. As you know, point of sale is something that we are not too keen on as realtors and as an association, but we are following this very closely because it has to do with safety and health issue. Of course, the third bill that we're tracking was AB 2527, which, hear this, bans the use of credit reports in leases. In other words, this assembly person introduced a bill that would stop a landlord and or a housing provider from using credit reports in order to look at the financial stability of the tenant. Fortunately, this thing was shelved after vociferous opposition from the apartment building associations and the California Association of Realtors. So that's gone for the time being. The next one has to do with AB 852. This has to do with creation of climate resilient districts. In other words, a city will have the power to create a district, just like we did with San Rafael on the Melrose, right? If that city feels that that district is interfacing with wildfire areas and so forth, as an example in the city of Glendale, and the property owners can be assessed an incremental tax or ad valorem tax over and above the property that they will be paying. Of course, we are, you know for a fact that we are very closely watching this to see the language of it and how it's going to affect your clients and the homeowners. The next one has to do with AB 2166. This is something that we have been behind, and I'm glad that to see this. It devotes about 30% of the Fed funds to home ownership. We're about home ownership. Most of the money that would come from federal level in order, for subsidies and so forth to the state of California addresses units that are for rent. So these, while they are important, they do not address this wealth generation or intergenerational wealth gap that we are facing today. We are pleased to say that CAR will support and sponsor a bill that would say, look, raise the 10% to 30% and help us increase home ownership in the state of California. The last one that I wanted to talk to you about, as you know very well, as I do, that the two biggest obstacles to home ownership is number one, your supply, and number two is the down payment. This is a bill that addresses the down payment and the methods in which to increase revenue or what have you to be able to generate sources for down payment, especially for the first-time buyer and the disadvantaged communities. So now, let's talk about the electrification poll that Glendale Association, along with Pasadena, Burbank, Greater Los Angeles, and several AORs, asked for National Association of Realtors to conduct. The reason, as I told you, is because there is a lot of overtures to electrify or to attempt to electrify existing homes And we wanted to see how the people in California, the voters of California, feel about this, especially if it becomes a point of sale mandate. So I will be sharing with you some of the results, right? And basically the executive summary of it. First and foremost, California voters are clear that climate change is a problem. By about 70% majority, they think that it's either a major problem and or a crisis problem. It is important to note that we are on our way to total electrification by 2045 in state of California. They also believe that the local governments are doing too little to reduce carbon. An example of that is what is going on in the city of Glendale with the Grayson power plant and the discussions that has arose around the repowering of that power plant. We also found out through the poll that 4 in 10 believe that local county and city governments have a great deal of responsibility about this thing. So now you see a shift from state to state and local governments. And that's an interesting find in this survey. Also, tax breaks, credits, or incentives for actions or purchase that reduce carbon emissions attract a great deal of support. In other words, if you want a house to become, or a home to become electrified, incentivize it, right? This is the carrot and the stick approach, so to say. But the most important finding of this poll, which by the way we will be sharing with our legislators, including the City Council, as well as the Assembly and Senator Portantino, is the following. That about 71% of the folks that have been interviewed, these are voters up and down the state of California, oppose a policy that will require a home seller to replace gas appliances with electric appliances before they sell their home. So in other words, no to point of sale mandates. We do polling like this in order to be able to educate and advocate with our policymakers issues that are important not only to us as realtors, but our clients, homeowners, and our community. So this is the most important finding of this poll, and I'm glad that this poll was done. And as I said, we will be sharing that. We were waiting to share this with you first, our ambassadors. I call you all our ambassadors for the Glendale Association of Realtors before we release the poll to the City Council as well as other legislators. So what's next? This is the screenshot of housingiskey.com. You've seen this screenshot many, many times. This is the data and statistics for the city of Glendale. 6,132 applications were filed for help to get help on COVID-19 rent relief. 3,000 of them were responded to and attended to the tune of about $14,000 per applicant. That's a huge deal. So far, City of Glendale has received, the tenants and the housing providers have received $43 million in COVID-19 rent relief assistance. We started talking about this thing, if you remember, about a year ago. But again, it's about 3,000 out of the 6,100. But the most important part is that this addresses the most vulnerable in our city, and that's what matters the most. The reason I wanted to remind you about this thing is because March 31st is the deadline. If you have clients and or yourself own units that the rent has not been paid, you have up until March 31st to fill out the application. That's how you will be in the queue. Other than that, after that, that's the deadline. I don't believe that they will extend this program anymore. All right, on to local level, city council, race June 7th or 6th, and who's running and who's not. The list that you see are the list of the candidates that have taken out the papers to run for the city council in the city of Glendale. 3 of them, Mr. Najarian, Mr. Brotman, Ellen Astorian, have filed back the papers and they have been deemed qualified. We will follow this up until March 11th to find out basically who else will be qualified to run for this race. And that's the update on it. Right after March 11th, what we will do, once we know who the qualified candidates are, we will provide them with a questionnaire that your executive team and your board of directors has come up with. And once they answer those that questionnaire, we will take them and then we will interview them. And for those of you remember from the past, we've done that in the town hall setting, and we've also done it on the board of director level setting. After that, then the association will decide who we are going to be supporting and who we are not. On a much lighter note, what I'd like to do is to talk about the happiest cities in America. Walletop puts this out every year, and I thought I'll share this information with you. The #1 happiest city in America is the city of Fremont in California. Number 9 is Huntington Beach. San Jose is number 4. San Francisco is number 3, right? Now, what about Glendale? Well, Glendale made the list, and it's the 18th happiest city in the nation, as reported by Walletop that exists. And to be very honest with you, I think one of the reasons for that is because Glendale has got the best realtors that there are in the state of California. I kid you not, I truly believe that. With that, Mr. President, that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Greg, before we go there, thank you as always for all of your important
great information, Greg. Thank you.
And thank you for all of your help during virtual Pledge Day. Greg was able to step in and explain certain things to both the senator and the assemblywoman in a very concise way about what we were talking about. All right, do we have any? Carmen, you have a question.
I do. Thank you, Greg, for this fabulous information. My question is regarding housing is key. Do you know if a tenant who had filed, let's say last year, for unpaid rent and the landlord received the unpaid rent for them, would be still eligible to file for this year's unpaid rent?
I don't know the answer to that. And again, your best bet is to reach out to housingiskey.com. They have people that can answer those questions to you. It could very well be, but I don't know the answer to that.
Just to share a tad bit of information here, I've been dealing with Housing is Key for a while now this year, and they are totally non-responsive, unfortunately. Every time I call, they say, oh, a case manager hasn't been assigned to this application. I have a tenant who hasn't been paying rent. And, you know, they're just giving you the runaround. And there is no one, there's no supervisor to escalate to or any other number. They will not share any other information. And the whole time is quite long. So I don't know exactly what's happening there. These 3,081 people who received their money, they're lucky, but the other half, I don't know what's happening to them.
Well, let's, I mean, it's interesting, something about us Californians, right? A need becomes a right, and a right becomes an entitlement. Let's be very, very honest about this thing. And I don't mean to be critical. We're not entitled to any of this. This was help that was given through the federal and state government in order to alleviate as much as possible the burden that exists on the tenants because of the pandemic and as well as the housing providers. 50% of them in City of Glendale have received help. And this will continue, by the way, until March 31st. Those applications have to be filled. The process we knew from the beginning, Carmen, we talked about this thing, that is going to be bogged down because it's hundreds of thousands of people applying for it. They could not ramp up a production line to be able to respond to that, especially in pandemic. Pandemic affects the governments as well, right? And so my encouragement, my suggestion is, if a case manager has not been assigned to you, just be patient and make sure that that application is in the queue because you have up until March 31st. The applications that are received before March 31st will be attended to and responded. When, how long after March 31st is something that your guess is as good as mine.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions for Greg? Well, thank you, Greg. As always, we appreciate your information and your knowledge